All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're digging into one of the most complex and, frankly, urgent stories playing out in Canada right now. It's this high-stakes clash between Indigenous rights, resource development, and, well, the very future of the nation itself. You see the headlines, sure, but the roots of this thing, they go back centuries.
Okay, let's start with what's happening right now. This quote, it's from a real lawsuit, and it just perfectly captures the tension at the heart of what we're talking about today. So, what's going on here? Well, 9 First Nations have taken the Canadian government to court. And the reason why is a set of new federal laws that are designed to fast-track huge projects. We're talking pipelines, mines, that kind of thing, all in the name of national interest. The First Nations argue that this just tramples all over their rights and the government's legal duty to consult them. The government's take? They say they're just fulfilling a promise to get these big, nation-building projects off the ground faster. So you can see this is way more than just a legal fight. It's a collision of 2 completely different visions for Canada's future.
But here's the thing, to really get what's at stake, we can't just look at today's headlines. This whole conflict is just the latest chapter in a really long and often painful history. So to understand today, we have to go back.
You know, for most of Canada's history, the official government policy wasn't about partnership. It was about assimilation. The goal was to basically absorb Indigenous peoples into the Euro-Canadian culture, and the methods were, frankly, devastating. And the most infamous tool of that policy was the residential school system. I mean, for over 100 years, more than 150,000 Indigenous children were literally forced from their homes and sent to these schools. The official reason was education, but the real goal was to cut them off from their families, their languages, their entire culture. The last one of these schools didn't even close until the late 1990s. Think about that. The legacy is just this deep, multi-generational trauma and a foundation of broken trust that still felt so strongly today.
And this quote from Rye Moran, who directs the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, just hits it on the head. This isn't just Indigenous history, it's Canadian history. And that legacy of harm, it's the essential backdrop. You can't understand the fight for rights that came next without understanding this first.
So let's move into the 20th century, because this is where we start to see a fundamental shift in the legal landscape. The resistance that was always there really started to gain traction, and it forced this huge change in Canadian law and politics.
And what's really wild is how quickly the ground shifted here. It kicks off in 1969 with something called the White Paper. This was a government proposal to basically get rid of the Indian Act and the whole legal idea of Indian status. But Indigenous leaders saw it for what it was, the final step in assimilation. And they fought back, hard. The government had to withdraw it. Then, just 4 years later, you get a huge Supreme Court case with the Nisga'a Nation that, for the first time ever, acknowledges the existence of Aboriginal title to land. So in just over a decade, the whole conversation flips from erasure to recognition. And then comes the big one in 1982. Aboriginal rights get written right into the Constitution. And this is it. This one sentence in the Constitution. Section 35. It says, the existing rights of Aboriginal peoples are hereby recognized and affirmed. Now, the crucial thing here is that it was written to be really broad, kind of vague on purpose. It didn't actually list what those rights were, which basically set the stage for decades of court battles to figure that out.
And that's exactly what happened. Suddenly, with the Constitution on their side, Indigenous groups started using the courts to define and defend their rights. The fight for self-determination moved from the protest line to the courtroom, and the Supreme Court became the main referee.
And all of that brings us to the modern era, which is really defined by this one single, incredibly powerful, and very complicated word: reconciliation. So, reconciliation, what is it really? At its heart, it's about trying to repair this deeply broken relationship. But what does that actually look like? Well, you can see it happening on 2 main levels, these big national frameworks and then the actual on-the-ground partnerships. So first, at the national level, back in 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report on the history of residential schools, and it ended with these 94 calls to action. Think of it like a roadmap for changing society, covering everything from child welfare and education to the justice system. Then, in 2021, Canada took another massive step. It passed a law to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Everyone just calls it UNDRIP. It's this international framework that recognizes a whole bunch of rights. But there's one idea in it that has become absolutely central to the whole debate over resource projects.
And that idea is free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC. It's a total game changer. Let's break it down. Free means no one's pressuring you. Prior means they have to ask you before they start doing anything. Informed means you get all the real information. And the big one, consent. It means Indigenous peoples have the right to say yes or to say no. This changes the whole relationship from just being consulted to being a genuine partner who might have veto power.
And this isn't just about high-level policy. You can see the shift happening on the ground, too. Take Parks Canada. These numbers show a real trend toward cooperative management. But look at this last line. The number of places that are actively supporting traditional Indigenous practices, it's nearly doubled in just 2 years. It's gone from 39 to 77. That's reconciliation in action, moving from talk to real partnership.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. You've got this history of assimilation, then a legal revolution that confirms rights, and now a national push for reconciliation. So where does that leave us today?
It leaves us right back here, at this fundamental tension. On one side, you've got the government focused on nation building, pushing through big economic projects. And on the other, you have Indigenous nations standing on their hard-won constitutional rights to self-determination and having a real say over what happens on their lands. And the debate around this is, you can imagine, fierce. For a lot of people, this growing Indigenous influence is reconciliation in action, a necessary step towards justice. But others worry that it's creating economic gridlock, making it almost impossible to build anything. And that raises the big, unresolved question. Is this process about getting to a clear yes or no on a project, or does it just create a cycle of endless court battles?
And this is the fundamental question that Canada is wrestling with right now. In the courts, in corporate boardrooms, in communities all across the country. What do you do when the government's idea of national interest smacks right into the rights and interests of Indigenous nations? There are just no easy answers.
So this isn't just a legal or a political question anymore. It's really a challenge to the country's identity. With these powerful constitutional and international tools in hand, Indigenous nations are actively reshaping what partnership means, and it's forcing a national conversation about what kind of country Canada actually wants to be.